The 7th year of marriage with Arya. She brought her lover home without any scruples. Worried that her lover might feel inhibited, she drove me out of the house when I had a high fever and couldn't recover. When I was beaten to death by hooligans in a dirty and deep alley, she was wantonly making love with her lover in bed. What if your husband is so seriously ill and faints outside? Arya said in a cold tone, it would be better if he died. And she got her wish. I did die indeed. The door of the living room creaked open and then slammed shut. Then the ambiguous voices of a man and a woman could be heard. It was Arya who came back. In the years after marriage, our relationship was not good. After making sure that I wouldn't interfere with her relationships outside, she became bolder and bolder. She often sent me a message to inform me and then blatantly brought people home. Perhaps because of the virus in my body, for the first time, anger surged up in me. I walked out of the room and silently turned on the light in the living room. The two people at the entrance were obviously startled. The young boy cursed in a low voice, put his arm around Arya, and looked at me provocatively, with a frivolous tone. Uncle, if you're scared stiff, will you be responsible for satisfying my sister? Arya frowned and glanced disgustedly at my haggard face. Why are you at home? Didn't I send you a message? I had been in a coma all afternoon and didn't have time to check my phone at all. Because I was really feeling uncomfortable, I said in a dry and hoarse voice, take him to a hotel for the night tonight. What I said sounded to her lover like I was driving them out. The boy blew on Arya's neck and said, Sister, Uncle doesn't welcome us. He can't even please you as a live-in son-in-law and has no sense of propriety. I don't know why he's been occupying this position all the time. His words hit the mark with Arya. Arya thought I was dull and boring. If it hadn't been for her father forcing us to get married, she wouldn't have looked at me twice. The boy's words reminded her that I was just a freeloader and had no right to say no to her. So she put on a sullen face and said in a cold tone, get out. I was so weak all over that I didn't even have the strength to resist. Even though I repeatedly said that I was sick, I was still mercilessly driven out of the house. I pounded on the door, begging her to throw me a piece of clothing or let me get my phone. What responded to me was the sound of the man and woman making love that rang out again in the house. It was already late at night. After being driven out, I walked aimlessly on the street in my thin clothes. Until I met a group of drunken hooligans. They stopped me and asked for money. After searching me and finding nothing, they took it out on me. Fists and feet rained down on me. I hunched over, and the continuous pain in my body tugged at my nerves. The gusts of cold wind in winter made me shiver. My nose was filled with the strong smell of alcohol and cigarettes, as well as the smell of blood on my head. I don't know how long this one-sided beating lasted. My head was dizzy and everything in front of me was pitch black. A big mouthful of blood accumulated in my chest and finally, I spat it out with a wow, blooming big red patches on the white snow. By the time the hooligans noticed, I had already lost my breath. They were so scared that they fled in panic, leaving only my body with a bluish-purple face. I stood not far away like an outsider, watching myself being gradually buried by the heavy snow. I suddenly remembered that many years ago, on such a snowy day, my mother took me to the Arya family. At that time, Arya was like a princess in a fairy tale, wearing fluffy clothes and greeting me. She stuffed the warm milk in her hand into mine. She raised a bright and warm smile and said, drink it quickly. It's cold outside. Don't catch a cold. But now, Arya would never care about me like she did back then. Just because she hated me for marrying her at her father's behest. When the sky was just getting light, I drifted back home. Arya's lover was sitting in the study playing with my computer, and from time to time he made tut-tut sounds. I saw him tap his fingers lightly, and then I curved my lips into a smile. The next second, I put on a nervous and helpless expression. Sister, I accidentally deleted your husband's project proposal. Won't he be angry? Arya walked over in her pajamas, skillfully kissed the man on the cheek, and said with a face full of indifference, let him do it again. She didn't know that it was a proposal that I had stayed up for days and nights to make. Or rather, even if she knew, she wouldn't care. Arya was a pampered young lady. Because her mother died early, Arya's father doted on her especially. As a result, she knew nothing about managing the company's affairs and didn't want to learn either. Helplessly, Arya's father had to look for a trustworthy person to take care of it for her. So I, who was adopted and funded by the Arya family, naturally became the top choice. The deleted proposal was a very important cooperation for the company. If I were still alive, I would probably have argued with her about it, but I'm dead. When alive, one doesn't care about what happens after death, and it's the same after death. Do I hate the Arya family? Not really. Without the Arya family, I would have died in some corner long ago, and I would never have had the worry-free life I have now. But it's impossible to say that I don't have any resentment at all. Arya has a bad temper and her likes and dislikes are very clear. In these years, I've been humiliated many times in front of her and her second-generation friends. And there were the young lovers she kept taking on one after another. Arya blatantly arranged for her lovers to work as her assistants in the company. They flirted without caring about the occasion. Everyone in the company knew how spineless I, the son-in-law of the Arya family, was. Our marriage existed in name only. Sometimes when I heard the noises coming from Arya's office, the expressions of the employees under me couldn't help but show a bit more sympathy. I could only endure it in silence. Her behavior also made her lovers become even more unscrupulous. The ugliest incident was when one of her lovers came to provoke me. I just ignored a few insignificant words and didn't bother to get angry. But he really shouldn't have insulted my deceased mother. The boy with red lips and white teeth had a youthful air about him, but he was also very reckless. He somehow found out about the past between my mother and Arya's father. He came to my office arrogantly to mock me. "President Masayuki, you're really calm. If I were you, I would have gone home long ago. Why bother losing face in the company?" I looked up from the documents, glanced at the uninvited guest in front of me, and just said calmly, "You don't even feel ashamed to be a mistress." Why should I, a legal husband, feel ashamed? Seemingly irritated by my indifferent attitude, the boy snorted coldly. I have to say that some people are really shameless. The mother failed to seduce someone's father and the son was even willing to marry into the Arya family. The mother and son are equally despicable. Just this one sentence completely ignited my anger. I grabbed the man by the neck and pinned him to the ground, punching him hard. By the time others arrived, he had already been beaten black and blue by me. Arya let out a scream, pulled me away, and pointed at the man half lying on the ground and said angrily, "Masayuki, you're crazy. Apologize to him quickly." My eyes were bloodshot and I was panting heavily. Do you know what he said? No matter what he said, you can't hit people. Hurry up and apologize or you'll get out of the Arya family. He said my mother seduced your father. Arya was stunned for a moment, but still stiffened her neck and said, "He wasn't wrong." Did your mother dare to do it but not admit it? I stared at her fixedly and warned her, shouting her name word by word, "Arya." She was startled by the anger in my eyes and looked away without saying another word. Perhaps she also knew that this incident was too embarrassing. From that day on, she replaced this lover. When Arya's father found out, he scolded her severely. Then he earnestly told me that Arya still cared about me. Otherwise, she wouldn't have broken up with that boy so quickly. I just smiled at this and didn't take it seriously. Seeing my attitude, Arya's father hung his head and sighed, "You two used to get along so well. How did it become like this now?" Did we get along well? It seemed that we did. But the harsh words over the years had already exhausted the affection we had back then. In fact, when Arya and I first met, our relationship was completely opposite to what it is now. We could even be said to be friendly. When I first came to the Arya family, I felt uncomfortable with the life of the wealthy family and was often restrained and uneasy. Arya took me to integrate into it. She introduced me to her friends and told them to take good care of me. At school, she took the initiative to ask the teacher to let her sit with me. Even when I, because of my ridiculous self-esteem, always asked the driver to drop me off halfway before arriving at school, Arya didn't laugh or show dissatisfaction when she saw it. Instead, she got off the car with me and walked to school with me. At that time, everyone said that I had won Miss Arya's favor and envied me. Most of the rich young ladies and young masters in this kind of aristocratic school looked down on poor students. So I naturally received some ostracism. I always remember that when I was dragged into the toilet by a group of boys to be bullied, Arya rushed in with a broom. She said, "Masayuki is from my Arya family. Whoever makes things difficult for him is making things difficult for me, Arya." She was like a goddess coming against the light, pulling me out of the mire. Young Masayuki had hidden Arya in his heart since the first time he met her. She was a dream that I could only long for but never have, quietly taking root and sprouting in my heart and unconsciously growing into a towering tree. When Arya's father asked me to marry her, I was willing. But in this marriage, I was the only one who was willing. Arya and her lover went out. When passing by a street, they saw a crowd gathered at the entrance of an alley. The boy went over to listen. "Sister, I heard that someone died. It's so scary. You must take me with you when you go out recently." Arya obviously liked such caring words and curved her lips into a smile. The boy then said, "Sister's husband went out last night. Will he also encounter danger?" Arya glanced at the crowd and said indifferently, "It would be better if he did." Even though I had long stopped having any expectations of her, at this moment, my heart still sank suddenly. It felt like there was a big hole in my heart, and the cold wind was pouring in. Arya had been sitting in the company for most of the day when my assistant found her. "President Arya, President Masayuki didn't come today. Is his illness still not cured?" Annoyance was clearly visible in her eyes after hearing this. "Why are you asking me? Go find him yourself." Assistant Chen's face froze and he quickly apologized, "Sorry, President Masayuki's phone can't be reached. I thought you and he were." He didn't say the rest of the words. Probably he really couldn't associate us with the word couple. After Assistant Chen left, Arya frowned tightly. I guessed that she was wondering whether I had taken my phone when I was driven out last night. She couldn't remember clearly and simply didn't bother to think about it. The less trouble, the better. I heard her muttering to herself, "Such a grown-up person, how could he get lost?" Arya put everything behind her and started browsing the new clothing and bags of the season. She didn't care about worldly affairs, so she didn't know that there was a big business deal to be negotiated in the company today. In the afternoon, the partners came to talk, and the assistant came to her again. "President Arya, President Masayuki still hasn't been contacted. The representatives from the other side have already arrived." Arya was a bit unhappy. "President Masayuki, President Masayuki. Will the company go bankrupt without him? It's just been one day that he didn't come and you keep asking and asking. Did I hire you to do nothing?" Assistant Chen was choked by her words and walked out speechless. He muttered to himself for a while. It was okay for a small project, but for a huge project worth hundreds of millions, the boss had to be present to make decisions for sure. She just let go of everything and didn't care about anything. The people under her were really worried to death. Unable to find me, Assistant Chen had no choice but to brace himself and ask the other party to go back first and talk about the cooperation later. During the whole process, he kept bowing and nodding with an apologetic smile. I pursed my lips and stared expressionlessly at Arya lying on the office chair. In an instant, I seemed to see the bleak future of the company. It was 3 days later that Arya really realized that she should look for me. I was floating in midair and watched her open the door of my room. Looking at the cold room, she suddenly realized that she hadn't seen me for several days. Every day when she got home, the first thing she faced was the pitch-dark living room. I quietly watched her find my number from the address book. The ringtone rang on the bed. For a moment, her expression went blank. She slightly frowned her beautiful eyebrows and murmured, "He didn't even take his mobile phone with him." As soon as she finished speaking, her expression gradually changed and suddenly she sneered. She even clenched her fists and said angrily and unhappily, "I don't know who he's fooling around with again." I was suddenly stunned. I didn't know where she got this conclusion from. Wasn't it always her who fooled around? When she angrily whispered the name Luna, I finally understood why she said that I was fooling around outside. That was at a class reunion 2 years ago. The boy that Arya liked during her school days was also present. The man who had led the bullying against me in high school started to tease us. I always wondered why Arya protected Masayuki so much back then. Turns out he's like a child husband kept at home. Everyone burst out laughing. Among them, some were kind-hearted, while others were malicious. A girl who had always disliked Arya covered her mouth and said, "It has to be Miss Arya. I've only seen things like buying a poor boy home to be a husband on TV, those feudal TV dramas from the old days." Arya wasn't the kind of person who would swallow her anger. She immediately retorted, "My family is rich. What's wrong with my father spoiling me like a princess? Even if he raised 10 poor students and waited for me to choose one as my husband, he could do it. It's a pity that you, a wage earner, can only envy me." The girl was so angry that her face turned bright red. Seeing that they couldn't get the better of Arya, they turned their attention to me. A male classmate with a big gold chain around his neck put his arm around my shoulder and said, "Look at how glamorous Masayuki is now. This suit is custom made, right? No wonder they say that smart students are good. There's no future in working hard. Marrying into a wealthy family is the right way. I remember that when you were at school, you used to change between 2 sets of school uniforms every day." Several other men also asked me with a grin, "How does it feel to live off a woman?" No matter how much I liked Arya and was grateful to Arya's family, I was still a man and I also had my self-esteem. If it hadn't been for Arya's father's pleading and considering the kindness over the years, I wouldn't have agreed to marry into her family. At that time, I actually wanted to leave in a huff, but thinking of Arya, I had to hold back my anger. I also had to force a faint smile on my face and calmly replied, "It's okay." At this time, the boy that Arya had a crush on suddenly said, "So, Arya, you like this kind of guy?" What he meant was self-evident. He was saying that I was weak and useless and that Arya had poor taste. Because of this incident, Arya thought that I had made her lose face and she hated me even more. When the reunion ended, it was raining heavily, but she kicked me out of the car halfway. I didn't even take an umbrella and could only lower my eyes to hide the disappointment in my eyes and walked back in the rain alone. It was at this time that a white car slowly stopped in front of me. The car window was rolled down and it was Luna. She had a wooden face and her expression couldn't be seen clearly. She just said 2 words, "Get in." We didn't say a word all the way. After arriving at her home, she threw me a set of clothes. I silently went to change into them. We sat facing each other at the table. Finally, she was the first to speak. "Divorce Arya." I shook my head. The time hasn't come yet. I haven't repaid the kindness of Arya's family. Luna was dissatisfied with this answer and was so angry that she pounded the table. "What kind of shitty contract did you sign? You've been working for Arya's family for free for 5 years already." I just smiled faintly and didn't say anything. Her lively and lovely personality hadn't changed at all. I didn't go home that night. The next day, Arya came to find me in person. The fact that I was taken away by Luna easily reached Arya's ears. She pushed the door open angrily, glaring at me and Luna as if she wanted to bore 2 holes in us. Neither of them was an easygoing person. Luna put her hands on her hips and said in a sarcastic tone, "Well, isn't this Miss Arya? What brings you to my house?" Arya didn't say anything and just gave me a fierce glare. Before I could say anything, Luna snorted coldly, "Are you in a hurry to catch your husband cheating? You can sleep with other men outside, but you don't allow your own husband to be with other women." What a double standard. Only after she said that did I realize why Arya was angry. Just as I was about to explain, she laughed instead. "Of course not. He's born inferior to me. As the dog of Arya's family, how can he betray his master?" It felt as if my heart was yanked hard by an invisible big hand. My face burned as if I had been slapped. Luna's face immediately darkened and she clenched her teeth. She wanted to say something to refute, but I gave her a look and quietly shook my head. Sitting in the car with Arya and looking at her unhappy expression, I explained, "Luna is my younger sister. She didn't even bother to lift her eyelids and sneered, "Your lover's sister?" I took a deep breath to calm down my emotions and said, "My biological sister." However, this time, she didn't say anything at all. Arya didn't care about my safety, but she cared whether she was betrayed or not. On the 5th day after I disappeared, she dialed Luna's number. Luna sneered and taunted her on the other end of the phone. "Miss Arya still cares about her husband? I thought you only had eyes for pretty boys. What do you want to know about your husband? Why don't you go and find him yourself?" In less than 3 sentences, Luna hung up the phone. Arya was so angry that she threw her mobile phone onto the office desk in reverse. Coincidentally, another call came in at this time. She thought it was Luna coming to annoy her again, so she didn't even look at it. Since Arya didn't get any information about my whereabouts from Luna, she didn't bother to look for me anymore. She seemed to think that I was just angry because she brought her little lover home and was deliberately hiding from her. But she forgot that it wasn't the first time she had brought her lover home. I had never been angry with her about this matter, because I stopped caring about it a long time ago. Arya pursed her lips and quietly cursed under her breath, as if venting to herself, "Do you really think that Arya's family and the company can't survive without you, Masayuki?" At this time, her lover swaggered into the office and bent down to give her a kiss on the lips. "Who made my sister unhappy?" I turned my head away and didn't look anymore. Since I had a fight with her last lover, she hadn't brought anyone to the company. Unexpectedly, after I had disappeared for just a few days, she was back to her old ways. While they were being affectionate, Arya's mobile phone rang again. She pushed the man away and answered it impatiently. "Hello, is this Arya, Masayuki's wife?" It was the police on the other end. They informed Arya of my death and asked her to come and claim the body. Arya frowned as she answered the phone. Her gaze at the mobile phone was still full of suspicion. The man beside her exclaimed, "Sister, your husband is really interesting. In order to get your attention, he even asked someone to pretend that he's dead." Arya had an expression of sudden realization and secretly breathed a sigh of relief. She still didn't mince her words, "Forget about him. It's better if he's dead." She hated me, but she also didn't want to bear the responsibility for my death. With this mentality, when she received another call from the police the next day, there was a bit of ridicule in her eyes. "If he's dead, then he's dead. You can deal with the body as you like." She probably thought that I was hiding in some corner eavesdropping. She thought that I would be hurt by her words, knowing that I meant nothing to her, and then come back dejectedly to continue working for her like a slave. Unfortunately, her wish was going to be in vain because I was really dead. Although Arya had always emphasized that she could still manage without me. But when she saw the clothes piled up in the bathroom, the kitchen that hadn't been used for who knows how many days, and the thin layer of dust on the coffee table, there was some inexplicable loneliness on her face. We didn't hire a nanny at home. Except for the cleaning staff who came to clean once every half a month, I usually took care of the rest of the things. Since I wasn't around, the company's affairs had piled up recently. Assistant Chen had no choice but to move all the documents to Arya's desk. Since the last time they went back, the partners had tried to find opportunities to have an appointment for talks several times, but he had found excuses to delay them. After several attempts, the other party couldn't see the sincerity of Arya's family and gradually gave up the idea of cooperation. Originally, if this deal had been negotiated successfully, it would have helped Arya's family to reach a higher level. Arya wasn't capable enough and was so troubled by the company's affairs that she was at her wits' end. So she simply gave up and hid at home drinking. Her cheeks were flushed, her eyes were blurred with drunkenness, and she was still cursing me. I found it rather funny when I saw this. In fact, even if I wasn't present, with the plan I had written, this cooperation would surely have been successful. But she had let her lover delete the document a few days ago. Arya probably didn't know how much loss her actions would cost to the company. Just as she was about to fall asleep in a daze, the doorbell rang. Outside the door stood 2 police officers in uniforms. Since she hadn't gone to the police station, the police had no choice but to come to her door in person. Arya was stunned in disbelief. The red wine glass in her hand suddenly slipped and the fragments splashed up, cutting a small wound on her ankle. She didn't seem to feel it and said in a trembling voice, "Is Masayuki dead? Is he dead?" The police officer opposite replied in a businesslike tone, "Yes, Arya. We informed you on the phone. Now please come with us to the police station to claim the body." I followed Arya and watched her rush downstairs and get into the car without even putting on a coat. At this moment, I almost thought that she was flustered because of my death. But until she saw my lifeless body, there was still no expression on her face, not even a trace of sadness. "How did he die?" When she asked, it was as if the person lying in front of her was an emotionless stranger, not her husband who had been married to her for 7 years. The police officer beside couldn't help but glance at her again and again. "He was accidentally beaten to death by drunken hooligans on the street on the second night. Since there was no surveillance in the alley, the suspect hasn't been caught yet." Arya staggered and took 2 steps back. Her calm expression began to crack. She suddenly remembered that the night when she drove me out of the house was exactly the second. Even the next morning, she and her lover clearly heard that someone had died on the street. If only she had been suspicious and gone to take a look that day, perhaps she wouldn't have known about my death until now. I saw a look of regret gradually appear on her face. I didn't know if she was regretting losing a docile dog. Luna rushed to the scene and happened to see her with a wooden face, not even a single tear falling. Without saying a word, Luna rushed forward and slapped her. "You heartless brute." Arya was slapped for no reason. The bit of sadness that had just risen disappeared in an instant. She covered her face and glared at her fiercely. "Are you crazy? Why are you here now that Masayuki is dead?" She reacted quickly on this matter. Luna's eyes were slightly red, with tears swirling in them. She stared at her resentfully. "He's my brother. Why do you think I'm here? I came to the Arya family with my mother when I was in the first year of junior high school. My father had been depressed ever since he failed in an investment when I was very young. I remembered that middle-aged man with a hunched back. He was an alcoholic all year round. Frustrated in his career, he took up gambling, making our already poor family situation even worse. My mother supported the family alone and also had to endure his domestic violence. At first, my mother would still hold me and my sister and say not to blame Dad, that he was just under too much pressure and that Dad used to be very nice, gentle and considerate. Gradually, he was not satisfied with just abusing my mother. He turned his fierce eyes on me and Song Luna. It was only after my brother and I were beaten black and blue that my mother finally made up her mind to divorce him. Since my father had no stable income, my sister and I were both awarded to my mother. At that time, Song Luna was only 8 years old. My mother couldn't bear to let her suffer with us, so she gave her up for adoption to a wealthy family. That family was middle class. Because the couple couldn't have children, they had the idea of adopting. My mother had inquired about them and found that they were very nice people. After that, she visited my sister many times secretly. Seeing that my sister was happy, she didn't disturb her. Since then, Song Luna was renamed Luna. My mother entered the Arya family as the savior of Arya's father. She and Arya's father were old classmates and she donated a kidney to him. Her request was that the Arya family could provide a place for me and my mother to live. When we first arrived at the Arya family, the servants of the Arya family despised me and my mother for repaying kindness in this way and often made things difficult for us in private. Arya would show up at this time and reprimand the servants sternly. At that time, I was inferior and sensitive while she was confident and bright. Later, Arya's father offered to sponsor me and then I entered the same high school as Arya. During high school, Arya was everywhere in my life. She was as enthusiastic as the sun in the sky, illuminating my gloomy corners. She took me to integrate into their circle and introduced her friends to me. I tutored her in return. Although for people like them who were wealthy, good or bad grades didn't matter much. The change happened when we were in our freshman year of college. Arya's father announced at the dinner table that he was going to marry my mother. I was so shocked by the news that I couldn't recover for a long time, and Arya had a gloomy face. She dropped a sentence that she didn't agree and then ran away from home. Under her commotion, the marriage of our parents was called off and my mother took me and moved out of the Arya family. Since then, I had been shut out by Arya. Even though we were in the same university, every time we met, she would walk away without looking sideways as if I were a stranger. In my senior year of college, my mother died of a serious illness. Before she left, she held my hand and told me that I must repay the kindness of the Arya family well. I choked back my sobs and agreed. On the day my mother passed away, Luna also learned the truth from her adoptive parents and knew that we hadn't abandoned her on purpose. After graduating from university, Arya's father found me. With tears in his eyes, he talked about the help he had given to me and my mother over the years. He also said that he was old now and couldn't do much, and that the company and Arya were left unattended. Then he took out an agreement. I picked up the pen and signed it. It was time to repay the kindness of the Arya family. When Arya suddenly saw my body, she felt a bit uncomfortable. That night, she called her lover to relieve her emotions. The two were having an intimate moment in bed. When the passion was at its peak, the man leaned close to her ear, panting, and asked, "Am I better than your husband?" Her lover didn't know the news of my death. Originally just a flirtatious remark, it took on a different meaning when it reached Arya's ears. Her face suddenly changed, and she pushed the man away. "Get out!" The man was interrupted inexplicably when he was in high spirits. He was full of confusion, but seeing her obviously cold expression, he still took his clothes and left dejectedly. I was floating in the living room, watching the man walk to the entrance with his trousers in hand and muttering a curse under his breath, "Crazy old woman." Hearing this, I raised my eyebrows slightly. It seemed that Arya's lover didn't treat her wholeheartedly. Arya walked out of the bedroom and came to the door of my room. She stared at the dim room for a long time, then looked back beside her, and finally let out a soft laugh. Huh? It sounded more like self-mockery. She slowly lowered her head, her voice extremely low. But in this big room with only her in it, I could still hear clearly. "Masayuki, why did you die?" I wanted to laugh a bit, but couldn't bring myself to do it. Because as long as this year passed, I could break away from the Arya family and wouldn't have to torture each other with her anymore. "Masayuki, why did you die?" I wanted to laugh a bit, but couldn't bring myself to. "When I was born, my father went bankrupt. When I could start working to earn money, my mother passed away. When I was about to regain my freedom, I lost my life." Good luck had never stayed with me, just as Arya's love had never fallen on me. Suddenly, the lights in the apartment went out. Arya shuddered suddenly in the darkness. She groped to turn on the lights, but it was useless after several tries. I remembered that the electricity bill hadn't been paid this month. It was probably a power outage due to arrears. The whole room was dim, and the moonlight outside the window seeped in faintly. Before I knew it, Arya was already in tears. I watched her squat on the ground and bury her head in her knees. The air was filled with inexplicable sadness and her soft sobs. I heard her whisper my name. What a strange woman. The biggest difference between me and Arya was that she would realize belatedly that she cared about me after I died, while I had given up on her as early as the second year of our marriage. Arya's father advised me to lower my profile and take the initiative to coax my wife. Although I had always cherished Arya in my heart, it didn't prevent me from following Arya's father's advice to get along with her. That day, I heard that she was at a club with her friends. After work, I thought of going to pick her up and take her home. The door of the private room wasn't closed tightly. I heard the voices coming from inside. It was Arya and her group of sisters. "Arya, your father is really something. Why did he let you marry such a poor and dull man?" "Yeah. When I saw him in high school, I felt uncomfortable. That poor and shabby look, I was even afraid it would rub off on us." Arya's tone revealed helplessness. Who knows what my father was thinking? I thought he was raising Masayuki as the watchdog of our family. The others burst out laughing. "Then why did you play with him in high school?" The woman's voice was tinged with contempt. "Don't you think it's interesting? Just throw him a few scraps, and he'll follow me with loyal and shining eyes." I can even imagine that he probably regards me as the light that saves him in his heart. I fled in a hurry. Who wouldn't want to be with their first love in their heart? But if you find out that from the beginning to the end it wasn't the moonlight at all but a wealthy person who looked down on you from a high position and shone a flashlight on you when they were in the mood. She enjoyed your admiration for her and then made fun of your humbleness wantonly behind your back. On that day my already barren world collapsed. As I left the company for a longer time, the progress of many projects in the company stopped one after another and the performance continued to decline. After inquiring, Arya's father learned the news of my death and called Arya back to the old house. He put the agreement I signed back then in front of Arya. Arya's father's hair was white and his hand holding the cane trembled slightly. He sighed deeply. I originally wanted to hide it from you, but you've been too reckless these years. I had stayed in the Arya family for 7 years, so Arya's father asked me to manage the Arya family for him for 7 years and work for the Arya family. He married his daughter to me because he also took a fancy to my business ability. If our relationship had been harmonious, naturally we wouldn't have needed this agreement. I would have been willing to help him guard the Arya family all the time. But he hadn't expected that my relationship with Arya would come to this point today. At the beginning of the year, he had even asked me if for his sake I could not divorce Arya when the agreement expired 1 year later. I looked at him silently at that time and he knew the answer. Besides the 7-year agreement, there was also a divorce agreement on the table. This was something I had prepared long ago. I would leave the family with nothing. I wouldn't take a penny of the Arya family's wealth. Just consider it as repaying the kindness of the Arya family cleanly. After reading it, Arya was shocked. She opened her mouth but couldn't say a word for a long time. Her nose felt sour and big drops of tears fell on the paper. How could it be like this? They told me that Masayuki was ambitious and had his eyes on our family's money. I thought that he tried every means to please Dad and was as scheming as his mother to get into our family. Arya's father's eyes were dull. Looking at his daughter's heartbroken appearance, he didn't show much emotion. Arya, your Aunt Jo and I are not what you think. We fell in love with each other, and we also wanted you and Masayuki to have a complete family. Forget it. I don't have much time left to live. You'll have to live your life on your own from now on. Arya left the old house in a daze and then received a call from Assistant Chen. President Arya, something terrible has happened. Please come back to the company and have a look quickly. I followed her and rushed to the Arya family in a hurry. Assistant Chen reported the situation with cold sweat on his forehead. It turned out that the previous cooperation had been snatched away by a rival company. Moreover, the bidding proposal of their company was extremely similar to the one we had discussed in previous meetings. At the same time, another company's newly launched product was exactly the same as the new product we had developed this quarter and they sold it one step ahead of us. These 2 blows hit the Arya family hard and left them powerless to fight back. I subconsciously thought of someone, Arya's lover. Was it really just an accident that he deleted the cooperation proposal when he was using my computer that day? This suspicion was confirmed not long after. Arya saw with her own eyes that her lover was shaking hands with the boss of the rival company. She rushed up like crazy, grabbed the man and questioned him. It was you, wasn't it? It was you who leaked the secrets of my company. The man pushed her away mercilessly, straightened his collar and said, Lady, you should have evidence when you speak. You can't slander me and throw dirt at me just because I broke up with you. All the files on my computer had been deleted completely, and I was already dead. Where could the evidence come from? Arya and the Arya family could only swallow this bitter pill in silence. The Arya family was now on the verge of collapse. Many capable employees resigned one after another. After Assistant Chen learned of my death, he also submitted his resignation report. Arya wanted to turn the situation around, but unfortunately, she had more will than power and could only watch helplessly as the whole enterprise was on the verge of falling. The drunkards who beat me to death were arrested and put in prison. Several of them were sentenced to 10 years in prison. Arya didn't remember to pick up my ashes until she had finished dealing with everything. By the time she remembered, my ashes had already been taken away by Luna. She rushed to Luna's house, but the neighbor told her that Luna had moved away last week. When she called Luna, the number was out of service. After making inquiries in many ways, she learned that Luna's family had all moved abroad to live. Arya had no choice but to give up. She was so worried about the company's affairs that she couldn't eat or sleep well. She could only fall asleep when she was drunk every night, and her hair was falling out in handfuls. Arya's father didn't plan to take care of her anymore. She could only turn to her former good sisters for help. But those rich second-generation kids avoided her when they saw that the Arya family was in trouble. Under her haphazard efforts, the Arya family finally went bankrupt. Arya's house was mortgaged and repossessed. When she was living in a cold and damp basement, she suddenly realized that there was nothing around her. Money, lover, friends, all had left her. She laughed crazily in the middle of the night. A fierce woman next door knocked on the door loudly. "Damn it. Are you calling for ghosts in the middle of the night? If you keep doing that, I'll drag you out and beat you up." She was so scared that her laughter got stuck in her throat and she didn't dare to make a sound anymore. She covered her mouth tightly and curled up on the ground, sobbing. In the basement without windows, there would be no moonlight shining on her. Her mental state was getting worse and worse. She often held my photo and cried and laughed at the same time. "Masayuki, I'm wrong. Come back. Sorry, Masayuki. I love you, Masayuki. I love you. Will you come back?" Later, I learned about Arya's news when Luna burned a newspaper for me. At that time, I was already waiting in line for reincarnation and suddenly there was an extra piece of paper in my hand. It clearly said, "The down-and-out daughter of the Arya family has gone mad and stabbed her former lover on the street." After all, she was Arya's father's biological daughter. No matter how disappointed he was, he couldn't just leave her alone. So Arya's father sent her to a sanatorium and asked people to take good care of her. I heard that in the sanatorium, she asked everyone she met if they had seen her husband Masayuki and when her husband would come to take her home. I smiled and casually waved the paper. Then I stepped into a new life.